Welcome to the Real News Network. I'm Jessica Devereaux in Baltimore. The FCC will be putting forward a proposal on net neutrality on May 15th. Now joining us in studio to discuss this is Kevin Zeese. Kevin Zeese is the spokesperson for popularresistance.org. Thanks for joining us, Kevin.
Glad to be here.
So first of all, Kevin, just explain really briefly, what is net neutrality?
It means we all have equal access to the internet. The network is neutral. Internet's neutral on who gets access, what content gets access. We all have equal access, and that's what we want to keep. We want the internet to be an equal access, open to all service.
And I know you're planning some actions in order to fight for this.
Exactly. We're starting actions on Wednesday the 17th. It's an interesting day, and then we're going to be Wednesday the 7th. We're going to continue to work all the way to the 15th. We're going to be there every day, 2 actions a day. And some of us are going to spend overnight again. I hate to go back to sleeping on a sidewalk, back to the sleeping inside the city kind of thing. I really don't enjoy it. But we want the FCC to see the anger of people. We want them to know that keeping net neutrality, keeping a internet that's not class-based, is something that's very important to us. We want them to come in the morning and see us there with our signs and our chants. We want them to see us at lunch. We want them to see us when they leave. We want them to know we're going to be there until the 15th, putting the pressure on. And a lot of organizations are working on this. On the 15th will be a very big day of action. A lot of groups are coming together for that peak day. We're going to try to build up to that from between now and the 15th. And we also see a lot of online action. There have been over 1 million emails to the commissioners telling them to support net neutrality. There are thousands and thousands of phone calls going to the commissioners. We urge people to call the FCC and let them know, especially to their chairman, and let him know that that we want net neutrality. We don't want the corporate domination of communication for the 21st century. I mean, the internet's become the free speech zone. It's where issues are debated. It's where we respond and discuss, where we can equalize the media. Because right now, we look at the cable TV and television networks. It's corporate dominated by a handful of corporations. We don't want the internet to be that. We want the internet to be democratized, where all people have access, free, open, and equal. Okay,
and you mentioned the chairman, Tom Wheeler. So can you talk a little bit about him and what role does he play in making this decision?
Well, Tom Wheeler is one of 5 commissioners who will make the decision. All 5 were appointed by President Obama. And that's not the way it always works out, because they serve longer than a president does. They serve 7-year terms. But coincidentally, President Obama has appointed all 5. So this is pretty much President Obama's commission. And they were all confirmed by the Democrat-controlled Senate. And so if you don't know what this commission is doing, that's where the source of the issue comes from, is the Democrats in the Senate and President Obama. Now, President Obama ran as the net neutrality president. Those were his own words. In Iowa in 2008, I will be the net neutrality president. And he strongly believes in equal access to the internet. Now the commissioner that you mentioned is Tom Wheeler, comes out of industry. And when President Obama appointed him, he called him the Bo Jackson of the internet, because he was in the Hall of Fame for 2 aspects of the internet, both telecom and internet. He was a Hall of Famer for both industries, because he's been involved in this for a long time as a lobbyist, as an investor, as someone who's made a profit of the internet for himself. He's worked for different trade associations as a lobbyist, and so he's represented the industry. Now, when he gets to the FCC, you hope that he would represent the public interest rather than the commercial interests of Comcast and Verizon and AT&T, the big 3 that dominate the internet, both on our telephones and on our computers. And so you'd hope that's what would happen. That's what we really want to see happen. And so we're actually making 2 demands of the FCC at this point. One, they need to reclassify the internet as a telecom information service, as a telecom service, as opposed to an information service. During the Bush administration, internet was classified as an information service, and that limited the amount of regulation that was possible. And so when the recent court decision happened that threw out an FCC rule on net neutrality, that was the reason why. If they reclassify and make it a telecom service, then they have much broader authority to regulate, and you can regulate in the public interest. That's the first thing. We want it reclassified so they can regulate in the public interest. The second thing is we want net neutrality to be put into stone. We want it very clear that the internet will be open, free, and equal access to all. And that's what net neutrality is, and that's what we want to see demanded. So that's where we're out there. We'll be out there protesting constantly between now and the 15th. We hope people will come out and join us. And by the way, there's also 27 FCC offices around the country. On popular resistance, we have an article. If you just go to Internet Freedom on the cloud on the right-hand side, you'll get all these articles about net neutrality and the protests and stuff. But there's 27 cities around the country where you have FCC offices. So if you can't come to Washington, D.C., we want you to organize actions in your own community to show people in the FCC there that people are angry and want to make sure that the internet stays democratized and not corporatized.
Kevin, I know this is not the first time you're fighting for net neutrality. I mean, it seems like, for me, like every couple of years or so this comes up. How do we, I know you mentioned those two demands that you guys are making, but what do you see really as being the solution for us to not have to continue waging this battle?
Well, the problem, like with many other issues in this country, is this is dominated by big corporate interests, and money rules Washington rather than people. So we have to really recognize this as part of the issue of whether or not we have a legitimate democratic government or whether we are a government that's ruled by money. And I think that's the big issue. On this issue in specifics, I would say I would much rather see us treat the internet as a public good, as a public service, rather than as a profit center for investors and for big corporations. I think, you know, the internet was invented by the United States. U.S. tax dollars funded the research and have continued to fund the research to improve the technology. We've given these corporations near monopoly, in some cities monopoly status. We've given them power to go on rights of way of government, private, public lands, so they can put their lines in and such. So they've given a lot of benefit from the taxpayers and from the government. So they need to recognize that their job is to be a public service. Now, even though the United States invented the internet and has spent so much money to improve it, our service is actually more expensive and slower than many other countries.
But then you're going to get those people who are going to say it's going to get even slower if you put it in the public domain, because, you know, it's like the DMV syndrome, like, oh, I'm going to have to be waiting and I don't know when it's going to...
Well, DMV's gotten a lot better at handling their problems, but if you want to compare the Post Office to Federal Express, you'll see the cost benefit there. The Post Office is actually less expensive and very reliable. They go to any part of the country. They, you know, even the most rural area gets covered. The thing about if you make this into a public service, what the changes is the goal is provide public service. When it becomes a corporate dominated, the goal is make profit. Make profit for your shareholders, make big salaries for your executives. That comes first. And that's why they're not investing in the faster lines. That's why the prices are too high, because they want to keep the profit and invest as minimal as they can, just enough to keep their client base. So that's the choice we have. Do you want a profit-driven system that serves the interests of investors, or do you want a public-driven system that serves the public interest? And that really comes down to the choice. And we're seeing, by the way, around the country, at the local level, more and more municipalities and rural areas are starting to form rural cooperatives. They're starting to form
which specific cities?
Well, the one that's one of the fastest is Nashville, Tennessee, is gone totally public. It's interesting. Cities that have public utilities as opposed to private utilities are much more likely to do it. And so, if you want to guess where they are, it's in the cities that have public utilities. In Nashville, they have public utility, and internet's part of that, and it's one of the fastest. It is the fastest system in the country.
Wow!
And so we could, so cities can do this on their own. 1,000 cities have already done public service internet between anchor institutions, government buildings, and schools and hospitals. So they've already started to do that. About 1,000. Hundreds and hundreds, though, are starting to do even broader than that and start to actually bring internet in a public way to people's homes. And that's where I think that's where you got to go. We've got to open up that so we have more ability for a public service rather than a private profit.
All right, Kevin Zeese, spokesperson for popularresistance.org. We'll certainly keep on track of this
story.
Hope
you'll come down to FCC.
I would love to come check it out in D.C. Absolutely, absolutely. Thanks so much for joining us in studio.
Happy to do it.
And thank you for joining us on the Real News Network.